Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me perfectly. Thanks very much for joining on this Wednesday afternoon. In today's Data Dash, we're going to cover how to create a data analytics roadmap. Now, to create a data analytics roadmap, it's going to take more than 30 minutes, but hopefully we can give you some background and some kind of insights into the steps you need to take. So my name is Douglas Day. I'm one of the founders of Data Lab, and I'm thrilled to be your speaker today. I co-founded Data Lab 12 years ago because of a passion to implement data analytics programs using like cutting edge or the latest technologies. And 12 years later, we've delivered projects to some of the world's best known brands. We've delivered across a range of different industries from healthcare, financial services, logistics, quick service restaurants, education, retail, agriculture, here in South Africa, where we're based, but also in the UK, Europe, USA, and Canada. And we've had the pleasure of working with really great clients, partners, and loads of different people. And we hope to bring some of that experience to this Data Dash webinar series. If you'd like to keep up with the announcements about the next sessions in this webinar series, then please follow either Data Lab or myself, and you can use the QR codes there to connect to our LinkedIn pages. The aim of our Data Dash webinar series is to provide you with valuable insights from the thought leaders here at Data Lab, including some of our data engineers and our analysts. And the goal is to offer bite-sized webinars that equip you with actionable takeaways and ideas that you can hopefully use to enrich discussions in your own organization. So in today's Data Dash, we'd like to step back from the technical aspects of data analytics, which often captivates a lot of webinar series, move away from the technology and talk about some of the kind of strategic challenges. So over the past 25 years of my experience, I've come to realize that technology and delivering technical solutions, whilst it's essential, doesn't always translate into driving ultimate business value. In our previous Data Dash session, Reza delved into 8 data strategies that can help you to leverage data to create alternative business models and value-added services and to drive competitive advantages. Today, we take a closer look at the foundations of really trying to achieve those strategic goals, and that is the data roadmap. So we'll outline what a data roadmap is, start to explore some of the key building blocks and articulate a framework that helps you to understand, evaluate, and align your organization's requirements and objectives with the necessary kind of data and development tasks and technologies. So I hope the session will provide you with some valuable insights. And let's get started. If you want to follow along, or if you miss any of the sessions, then we will be posting them on our YouTube channel. We're going to start by looking at the data roadmap and then explore a simple framework. So what is a data roadmap? So I'm going to start off with this definition. A data analytics roadmap is a strategic plan that outlines the steps an organization needs to take to develop and implement a data analytics program. It provides a clear vision of how data analytics will be integrated into the organization's operations, the processes, and decision-making. And a well-structured data analytics roadmap helps you ensure that data analytics initiatives align with business goals and objectives and provides a framework for their successful execution. So that's a really wordy and quite long definition. What's important when going through this definition is to highlight like certain key parts. And if you start ticking those boxes, then you know you're actually developing a data analytics roadmap. If you're not ticking those boxes, then you're defining something else. And so what I'm going to do now is take you through what I think are the kind of 5 key kind of standout components of that definition. So the first one is it's a strategic plan. Okay, and when we say a strategic plan, yes?
I don't know, it might just be me breaking up. It may be worth checking that internet connection.
Can everybody hear me okay? Cool. I can see a few people saying it's all good. Cool. Okay, so where were we? Strategic roadmap. So when we say that it's a strategic plan, what do we mean? So we mean that it's establishing a clear and compelling vision for the organization on how they're going to use data and data-related technologies. We mean that it's long-term, which means we're looking for an implementation that's going to go longer than 6 months. We're looking at implementations that are rolling out for 3 to 5 years. We're looking at determining the most critical initiatives and projects that will drive the organization's success. So this involves aligning the technology to the actual business objectives of the organization. It assures, or it kind of guides, that we assign the right resources effectively, whether that's financial resources or human resources, in order to kind of align them to those strategic goals. And in undertaking this whole process of developing a roadmap, one of the outcomes that you're trying to do is to mitigate risks. So by actually going through the process of planning, analysis, and understanding your existing environment and where you want to go to, you can identify some of those risks and mitigate them as you go through the process. I think some of the kind of non-tangibles of going through this process, though, are that you really get organizational alignment, that a roadmap looks to bring all the various different stakeholders of the organization together to create a shared vision. And then through that, you get this clarity of roles and responsibilities, and ultimately then that improves accountability and also then improves decision making. So, I think that's one of the kind of main pillars of a data roadmap, is that it is strategic in its kind of scope. The second thing that stands out for me is that it's an analytical program. And when I say a program, I'm comparing that to a project. So when we talk about a project is kind of very focused, and typically it has very fixed timelines, and they're relatively short. Whereas if we're talking about an analytics program, it's typically made up of multiple projects covering various different aspects of the data challenge. And it typically is delivered over a much longer period of time. So it's strategic in its nature as opposed to tactical. And the duration is ongoing as opposed to being very fixed and finite. So again, this is one of the kind of characteristics for me that really differentiates articulating a data roadmap versus a project plan, for example. The third thing that stands out for me is that it's around decision making. So ultimately, all the work that we're doing with data analytics roadmaps is to implement a set of technologies that can help the organization improve their decision making, and ultimately by improving this decision making to deliver growth. And what we can do is we can actually kind of articulate this as trying to answer 4 different types of questions. So the first question that we're trying to answer for the business is what has happened, and this forms what we would call descriptive analytics. The second types of questions that we're trying to answer would be why did it happen, and this we call diagnostic analytics. So this would be things like, why do we have certain customer support tickets, or looking at data quality issues in a production line. The third question that we're trying to answer for the business is what's going to happen. So now we're getting into the realms of predictive analytics. So here we're looking at things like credit scoring, or demand forecasting, or fraud detection. And the final group of questions that we're trying to ask or answer for the business is what should we do next? And this forms prescriptive analytics. So typical examples of this would be the traveling salesman and kind of route optimization. What's the best way for me to go and deliver these particular parcels to my customers? Or stock inventory optimization, in which stores should I have the appropriate level of inventory to meet the demand of my customers? So ultimately, everything that we're trying to do with developing a data roadmap, building loads of data infrastructure, the actual function of data analytics within the organization has to answer one of these 4 types of questions. And finally, for me, it's business goals. So I'm going to briefly introduce the concept here of something called metric trees. It aligns quite closely with traditional or old-fashioned balanced scorecards. And this is something that we're going to cover in future sessions. So as we go through, there might be a few sound bites and a few kind of leads to the kind of content that we're going to be producing in future webinars. So whilst it's really important to define clear business goals, it's equally important to align them with a specific set of metrics and KPIs. And a metric tree is a way to ensure that like data-related efforts, like all the work that we're going to do, achieve on those business objectives. And so what we first need to do is identify a business objective. And these are high-level goals that the organization wants to achieve. So in this example, we're going to be looking at like increasing revenue. The next thing that we do is try and break that down into what's called key result areas. So these are specific areas or domains within the organization where we can take deliberate actions which directly impact that objective. So in this case, we might want to increase customer acquisition. Okay, so if we increase customer acquisition, that should increase revenue. And then we define key KPIs that actually roll up into that key result area. So in this example, it might be the number of new customers acquired, customers acquisition costs, and conversion rates. And we might find other key result areas as well that we can use. So for example, for existing customers, looking at upselling opportunities. And so we can use these kind of frameworks or these kind of tools to help us define how we can deliver on business goals. And by going through this kind of process of looking at what are the KPIs and what are the kind of lead indicators that roll into those business goals, it helps us also to define what data we actually need and where we'd actually find that data, either inside the organization or outside. And finally, the last concept that stands out is that we're trying to build a framework. So we're trying to create some methods, some processes, some policies within inside our organization that can guide us on how we manage data analytics projects or programs. So to summarize then, we're looking at creating a strategic plan that delivers on a long-term analytical program that improves decision-making across a broad range of business questions, which are clearly aligned to strategic goals. And we're trying to provide or create a framework for managing the execution of that. So that in very broad terms is what we believe to be like a nice definition for creating a data roadmap. So how do you go about developing a framework that helps you support that? So we're going to break it down into really three very simple parts of the process. First, there's an element of planning. Then there's the execution. Then there's improvement and creating that virtuous kind of feedback loop where you can actually continue to improve your planning going forward. Again, this is a strategic initiative, so the timelines and the timeframes are going well out into the future. So what I'm going to break down here is some of the key kind of building blocks, and in future webinars, we're going to go into each of these building blocks in greater detail, but hopefully you'll get an idea of what that content will look like, and this will give you a kind of broad framework that you can kind of take away with you to ask the right kind of questions in your own organization. So the first thing that we need to understand in the organization are what are the business goals? What are the objectives that the business is actually working towards? What data do we need to inform the different types of questions that we've highlighted, those descriptive, diagnostics, predictive kind of questions? And then we need to get the right data into our organization to deliver the right insights to the right people at the right place at the right time and in the right format. And so we're going to use that framework of like the metric tree to define those KPIs. And like I said earlier, in doing so, defines like a lot of where the data source is or where a lot of the data will come from. The next really big kind of piece of work in like creating a framework is really baselining the current state of your environment. So this involves like assessing the organization's existing data assets, the quality of the data, what's your existing architecture, what tools and technologies do you use, what governance and security practices do you have in place, and what's the total cost of ownership from an infrastructure and people point of view. So this is a really comprehensive analysis that informs like the development of a data roadmap. And it kind of leads into identifying the strengths and weaknesses and areas of improvement of your existing environment. Following on from that, we look at data collection. So understanding what data we already have informs us then in terms of what data we don't have. So this part of the process is really around identifying new data sources and potentially new systems. These could be inside the company or inside the organization, or they could be external, and requires doing a process of kind of due diligence to identify where you can get certain data from and how it could be used in delivering on those business questions and the strategic goals that have already been identified. The next step in the process is identifying a method to prioritize what's going to be delivered and how it's going to be delivered. So in order to determine which initiatives or projects or tasks should be addressed first, it really involves kind of assigning a level of importance or urgency to various elements within the roadmap. So this could be based on things like the business impact. It could be that it delivers on one of those specific strategic goals. It could be based on the availability of resources or on dependencies. And increasingly what we see is companies adopting agile approaches to project management and prioritization that allow for more adaptability and change in the kind of to respond to the changes in business conditions. But this comes with a couple of caveats. So in order to be more responsive and to kind of adopt some of those kind of agile methodologies, you also need to look at the impacts that they have downstream. So it also has impacts on the technical team's ability to actually deliver in that way. So do you have things like automated deployment, automated testing, CI/CD pipelines? And then these then become prerequisites for how you go about then analyzing for tools and technologies. So when it comes to tools and technologies, we're really trying to identify appropriate software, hardware, and IT infrastructure components that are essential for managing, processing, analyzing, and visualizing the data. So, here you're going through the process of evaluating various different tools from across the whole data stack, from data integration, storage, analysis, reporting. And you're looking at that interoperability between them. Can they all connect? Can they talk to each other? Is this a data stack that we have the right skill set within the organization to go and deliver on? Jumped ahead of myself. So the next step is really identifying that skill and resources requirement. So this includes do you have the right expertise and competencies in the individuals, as well as ensuring that you've got the right kind of financial and technological resources to allocate to the project. So you're looking at things like data analytics skills, data engineering capabilities. Do you have data governance expertise? Do you have access to the right technologies and infrastructure already, or are these things that you're going to have to procure and bring in? And do you have the right financial resources to support that? So this requires typically this kind of part of the process requires quite a heavy interaction with human resources to ensure that there's programs and initiatives in place to upskill the appropriate people across the whole organization, not just technical resources, but front end consumers of the data. So once we've done all of those steps, we get to the point where we've got a pretty coherent plan. We understand what our current environment looks like. We understand what data we need to go and collect. We've prioritized our delivery based on our business goals. We've identified tools and technologies that we think will solve those problems and the skills gap necessary to go and deliver on them. So then the next phase is in execution. And this is a place that most developers and people are much more comfortable with. So the first part is data modeling. So this is really understanding those data assets and organizing them in a way that you can actually, go and store the data. So this is the process of creating conceptual modules, logical models, and then ultimately the physical kind of data warehouse that you want to go and build. Moving on from that it's around data integration. So this is, combining all those different various data sources and all those different various formats, whether it be in CSV files, JSON, APIs, directly connecting to SQL servers. These are all the different data sources that you've identified, and you've identified an appropriate set of technologies to go and deliver on, integrating all that data. It's around data transformation. So are you going to do more old school ETL type work, or are you going to move towards a more modern kind of ELT like design pattern? And then it's around what kind of data integration are you going to have to deal with? Are you dealing with more batch driven, more kind of traditional data integration, or do you need to go and integrate data more real time? And again, what kind of technologies do you need to solve that problem? And then ultimately, it's around data and quality assurance in integrating all that data, making sure that you've got processes in place to clean data, validate data, and kind of evidence exceptions. Once you've integrated all that data, the next thing is data analysis and data activation. So, data analysis really is the bread and butter of statistical analysis. It's data mining, it's machine learning, it's dashboarding and reporting. And you're really trying to answer those questions for the business using that framework that we outlined at the beginning. Data activation, though, is slightly more interesting. This is really around how you take that data and implement it in strategies that actually instigate change within the organization. So a great example of this would be, for example, in what's called reverse ETL, where you're pushing data from a data warehouse back into a line of business application so that you can actually use it in the operation. So it might be that you're trying to drive some marketing campaign from your CRM system. You've done some clustering inside your data warehouse, and now you're using reverse ETL to push those insights back into your CRM system to drive some campaigns. So again, your framework or your roadmap that you're putting together is going to articulate that you've got these capabilities available, and this is how you're going to use them within your organization. Then we move on to an important aspect, data quality and governance. So this is really ensuring that the data is accurate, it's consistent, it's compliant with regulations, and that you're establishing data quality and governance processes. Beyond that, we then start looking at things like data security. So here we're looking at things like access control, data encryption, data privacy, data backups, recovery, and archiving. So again, it's about putting in place policies and procedures to ensure that these things are actually being done within your environment. Then we need to come up with processes for testing. So here we're looking at various different types of testing. You'll look at things like data quality testing, so assessing the quality of the data and identifying and rectifying any kind of inconsistencies, where the data is incomplete. Then we look at data integration testing. We're looking at, has the process of data transformation actually worked as expected? You're using things like control totals and auditing. And the list goes on, looking at things like data validation, data security testing, looking at the outputs of analytics, performance testing when you're looking at various different workloads on your data warehouse or within your ETL processes. Then looking at the end user experience and getting user acceptance testing. Is it actually what the user needed? Can they actually use this? Does it help them affect change within the organization? And then when you get into an environment where you're deploying regularly, it's around how do you do regression testing? And then again, trying to align with some of the decisions we made earlier on around, are we trying to be more agile? Are we trying to deliver more regularly? You then start looking at, how do I implement automated testing? And again, this is all parts of the framework that you need to articulate and define. Beyond that, it's all around change management. And this is really essential. So you can build the best data warehouse, the best reporting and dashboards. You can push data into all the operational systems you like. But unless people in the organization actually start adopting the assets that you're producing, then it's all in vain. So key considerations here are things like communication, developing clear and consistent communication plans. It's around stakeholder engagement and making sure that you've got key decision makers involved in the decision-making process and that those processes are well defined. It's about ensuring that there's training and education. So this is not just for IT departments to make sure that staff are adequately trained on the technologies, but that the end user is adequately trained as well. And then it's really also around making sure that you've got leadership and sponsorship from the appropriate levels in the organization to ensure that change is affected, that we don't just produce these outputs and no one actually champions them. And then finally, I think, and it's an area that typically goes is missed, is documentation, ensuring that these processes and that the actual artifacts that you're producing are well documented, and that people can actually find that information so they can actually, serve themselves in terms of trying to answer particular questions. And that kind of wraps up the kind of execution phase of a framework. And then it really moves into the kind of improvement phase. So here, what we're trying to do is ascertain what's actually being used. So here, we're trying to make sure that people have got access. We're trying to understand who's got access and permissions to what data is actually being used and by what. Collating things like consumption metrics on reports or on various different data sets. We're trying to identify user behaviors, trying to see what data is being used by different people in the organization, and trying to identify maybe potential new opportunities to deliver new insights. We're looking at performance monitoring. We're looking at cost management. We're looking at policies around data retention and archiving, ensuring that these are actually executed. We're tracking things like security and compliance. And then data quality monitoring, ensuring that the quality inside of our data warehouse or various other data assets is of the highest quality. And then it's really around making that actionable, or making that exposed to users through things like alerts and notifications. So making sure people have access to take action when things go wrong, or when there are breaches in various different policies. And then finally, and again, I think it's an area that's typically underlooked, is accessing feedback. So that is going back out to the various different stakeholders and soliciting feedback. So this includes business users, data analysts, the IT teams. It's about going to end users, whether they be customers or be other internal departments. It's around actually establishing clear feedback mechanisms, such as surveys or focus groups. It's actually taking all that data and then going and analyzing it, and then out the back of that, actually creating actionable kind of or creating actions that feed back into the plan for the next iteration of development. And that really drives a cycle of continuous improvement. And so, yeah, having established all of that, then you have a really kind of clear framework in terms of policies, procedures, the technology stack that you're going to be delivering on, how you're actually going to deliver. And in the following seminars, what we'll do is we'll go through and start diving deeper into each of these different building blocks. So I think that is my time up. It's 3:30. I don't know if there's been any questions while I've been talking.
None so far.
Okay, cool. So the next event that we have is going to be in is going to be on the 29th of November. So that's 2 weeks from now. And what we're going to be doing is going through the first of those blocks and really kind of uncovering what the baseline state is. So what's the processes you can go through to kind of articulate where you are now, what tools and techniques can you use to evaluate your existing environment and to kind of document that. So, come and join us on the 29th of November, and we'll explore for another half an hour how you can evaluate the current state of your existing environment. Cool. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope you guys will join us again on our next webinar.